It's that time of year again. As I search for Christmas presents for the family, I'm always finding irresistible art supply bargains for me. And then there's the art store gift cards to spend after Christmas. As if Christmas wasn't bad enough, there's also our New Year's resolution to draw and color more. So if you're a marker or colored pencil person, you may be looking at mixed media sketchbooks or mixed media paper. Today, I'll be coloring in one of my favorite mixed media books. I'll tell you what I like about it, but more importantly, I'll show you why mixed media paper probably isn't what you want. Okay, so my dissatisfaction with sketchbooks, well, it kind of begins here in the drawing phase. I'm a technical illustrator, which means I'm the kind of weirdo who actually enjoys making precise shapes and accurate illustrations. When my final projects are not accurate, it bothers me. So, this is the kind of angle figuring out that I really like to do before drawing. And here's the thing, all of these guidelines have to be erased before coloring. And even if I sketch really softly and erase really, really well, even if I'm super careful, it still will damage the mixed media paper in most sketchbooks. Mixed media paper is soft. It remembers every line that you've drawn. Even if you erase the line, the markers will kind of skid over any area that has been rubbed or contaminated by an eraser. Even worse, when I finally move to the colored pencil stages, the pencils will magically reveal the indents or the scars that are caused by the original graphite sketch. If you've ever wondered why your colored pencils are constantly finding these little white lines or scars in the paper, those are divots, and those are caused by your pencil lines, or maybe somehow you've scratched the paper. Now, I draw and color professionally. This isn't my hobby. I use my illustrations for multiple purposes. I really don't want to be advertising my freelancing or coloring classes with a drawing full of little scars and pock marks. Plus, time is valuable. If I'm going to spend 2 hours doing something, I want to be able to use it for more than just this YouTube video, which makes the whole YouTuber sketchbook process, it's really just not a good fit for me. I want more than a book full of fun sketches when I'm done. So when I was done with this drawing here, I scanned it into my computer and turned it into a digital stamp. It's available with all my other line art in my shop, and there's a link to all of today's resources down in the description. So I did my little finicky drawing routine first, and then I made the digital stamp. And now I'm tracing that final line drawing into the sketchbook. I know, this process just isn't a good fit for me. That was a little bit of drafting tape, and I'm taping the line art onto the back of the sketchbook page that I will be coloring. And now I'm flipping that over onto the light board so that I can trace it through. At this point, I can be really smart about which lines that I need. I'm only tracing the most important guidelines, and by doing it this way, I'm damaging this mixed media paper as little as possible. Now I will roll a sticky tack eraser over the tracing. This is not a kneadable gray eraser. This is poster putty. Poster putty is stronger and it leaves less residue. This lightens the line, but it also removes excess graphite. Remember, markers and graphite are not friends. Markers have shellac in them, and shellac is a sealant. If you color marker over a graphite line, it's going to seal in the pencil line. It basically bonds it permanently to the paper. Once you go over a pencil line with marker, you'll never be able to erase it again. Okay, so I've got a vinyl placemat here, and I've cut it down to the same size as my sketchbook. And I know you're thinking that I'm doing this to protect the paper below, but I really don't care about that. I have no problem ripping out pages. The reason for the vinyl is that it's there to make blending easier. This is mixed media paper, which means it's not marker paper. I know it says ink on the sketchbook cover, but when they say ink, They mean ink pens, not our big, fat, juicy markers. Mixed media paper is, well, it's just not great for markers. It's not the worst paper you can use, but it's really, really far from the best. Even with the best technique in the world, because it's mixed media paper, the blends are just going to be a little bit choppy. It's not me. It's not the markers. When you do it, it's not you. It's because it's mixed media paper. The vinyl sheet it's there to slow down the drying time of the markers. The more time that ink stays wet, the more opportunity the ink has to blend. And this tip, it's not just true for sketchbooks. No matter what kind of paper you're coloring on, you should always have a moisture-proof piece of like glass, acrylic, or vinyl below your paper. All those tutorials where they tell you to color over the top of a piece of scrap paper, not good. Scrap paper speeds up the drying time. It makes blending harder because you got to move faster. You use more ink and you get frustrated. A cheap vinyl placemat makes blending so much easier. Now, before this starts sounding like a mixed media rant, I actually don't mind working on it. Yeah, I'm having a few issues where the ink, well, okay, it's a softer paper, so the edges of my coloring are softer and not quite as crisp as I'm used to. But that's okay, I can handle it. What kind of bugs me, though, are the corners. So for every twist on this screw part that I'm coloring, each one of those twists has like a little corner where the bump meets the main body. And darn it, every single one of these corners are rounded. So I'm going to have to come in and clean up the corners later with a colored pencil. It's just one of the things you got to do. The other kind of cool thing that's happening here, and I'm not totally sure it's showing up on camera, but you can see it really strong in real life. I'm using BV markers here. Now, BV is not a color like R for red or Y for yellow. BV indicates that this marker is made with some blue ink and also some violet ink. So there's a mixture inside this marker. And the magic of mixed media paper is that sometimes when you hit that BV with a lighter marker, one that has a lot of solvent in it, the darker color shatters. It basically breaks apart into its original ink ingredients. So where the BV20 marker is going over the top of the BV23, I'm starting to see hints of pink and aqua. The ink is separating and it's making it look like I used more markers than I actually used. It's kind of cool, but there's always the potential for this to happen with mixed inks on mixed media paper. It also happens on watercolor paper, just soft paper in general. I like the effect, but if you don't, just know that it's not your fault and it's not the markers, it's your paper. Okay, so I'm using a darker version of the same BVs that I used on the screw. This is BV25, and I'm going to start creating a darker green than Copic actually makes. I'm a little nervous doing this here because with the mixed media paper, I'm not sure how this blend is going to turn out. I know I can do it on Bristol or marker paper, but here, this is kind of an experiment. Copic doesn't make the dark green value that I'm seeing in the depths of my light bulb here. So I'm going to put BV down first, and then there will be more greens going over the top of it. Copic also doesn't make the right temperature of dark green for this light bulb. I'm picky, I'll admit it. Anyway, I want a cooler dark green and I want it to have more hints of blue. So over the top of that dark value BV, I'm now adding BG09, and this is just to adjust the temperature. And I'm leaving nice little points on the end of all my flick strokes because pointy flicks are easier to blend smooth than a hard border line. I'm trying really hard to give this paper every opportunity to blend. And here comes the green, finally. So down here, I'm going over the top of the BV underpainting, and I'm also going over the top of the BG temperature adjustment layer. Then I'm flicking out slightly further. So I've actually got 3 different shades of green here now. There's the BV area that's the darkest, there's the BG cooler zones, and then there's just GO7 all on its own. Now comes my final green, YG25. Switching to a YG means that the yellow ink in this ink blend, that mixture is going to help me blend on this slightly stubborn paper. One thing that I've noticed is that with mixed media paper, it makes Copic ink look darker than I'm used to. So I'm being really careful here not to over ink the paper and to be consistent about the number of layers that I'm using. If your sketchbook is full of streaky coloring, those streaks are caused by having one layer of ink in most spots, but then every once in a while you'll have 2 or more layers where your strokes overlap. And since mixed media paper dries fast and it doesn't let the ink move around and smooth itself out, it almost amplifies the streaky effect. The solution is to be generous with your blending ink. So go at least 2 layers, but also control the consistency of your layers to make sure that you don't have 4 coats in one spot next to a stripe that's only 1 or 2 coats. Now it's time to bring this, well, mediocre marker base to life. I'm going to bounce back and forth between 2 pencils. So there's a white pencil and a purple grape pencil. I'll use the purple to clean up those soft marker corners that I complained about earlier. And then I'll use both pencils to add the reflections to the shiny metal. These are soft colored pencils, and I really think that soft, waxy pencils stick easier to soft mixed media paper. Now, I'm not pressing very hard because it would be all too easy to damage the tooth of the paper, and that would create a shiny burnished area, and burnished areas do not take more layers of pencil. But I'm also coloring softly because I just did all that hard work with the markers, and I don't want to hide it. Once the screw end is done, I can finally work on the green glass parts of the light bulb. So I've got that light bulb up in the corner, and you're looking at it with a camera that's placed directly overhead, but I'm looking at it more from the side. So I'm seeing a totally different reflection than you are. It's similar, but it's different. I am seeing strong hints of both pink and aqua. So I'm going to be using those colors to draw the shiny bits and the reflections. The aqua comes from the color of my studio walls here. Aqua walls make aqua colored reflections. I talked about this exact concept in my Golden Star video. So, how about the pink? Well, my sleeve isn't showing on camera right now, but my shirt is a light coral color, and I just kind of simplified that color by using pink. Now, both the aqua and the pink pencils are opaque, and that's really important. I can get some layers of pencil onto this mixed media paper, but not a lot. If the aqua or the pink were translucent, then it would take more layers to build them up to looking like a proper reflection. So I didn't just choose these pencils for the color. I was also matching the opacity of the pencil to the needs of the mixed media paper. Now, before I cover too much of the green Copic with colored pencil reflections, take a good look at my marker blend here. I did everything I could to get a smooth marker blend, and yet it's still not completely smooth. That's not my fault, it's the paper. And I'm not just blaming the paper for my own ineptitude. I've been using markers for 30 years now. If I don't know how to blend yet, then I've got worse problems than blending. Anyway, the reason I'm pointing out the flaws in my coloring is that, first of all, people always tend to assume that everyone else's coloring is better than your own, which isn't true. When you really look closely at some of the blending that you see in my videos and other channels here on YouTube, you can see that you've been holding yourself to an impossibly high standard. Second of all, you saw my finished project in the thumbnail and the introduction of this video long before I showed you the ugly duckling phases. Every project looks like a dumpster fire before it looks better. The problem is, you focus on the dumpster and you never let go of those angsty, disappointed feelings. Again, you're holding yourself to an impossibly high standard. But last, I'm pointing out my ugly blends here as a warning to everyone who currently colors with markers on mixed media paper. It's not the worst paper in the world, but these same markers on better paper would have been lovely and smooth. Some of you are handicapping yourself right at the beginning of every project by using bad paper or like this, it's okay paper. Like I said, this isn't the worst paper in the world. It's actually one of the better mixed media papers that I've ever tried. But it is mixed media paper which wasn't made for markers, and it shows. I don't care what the label says. The proof is in how the paper performs, and markers just don't like soft paper. There are pros to using mixed media paper, although I really do think that in general, we need to be pickier about the sketchbooks we buy. It took decades for art supply companies to begin making sketchbooks using high quality watercolor paper. I mean, think about how long watercolor has been around. We're talking hundreds of years. And yet, really good watercolor journals were hard to find up until about 10 years ago. And we deserve some really good books too. We're just not getting them. Markers and colored pencils are way younger art mediums than watercolor. It's going to take a while for someone to finally get smart and start making books with excellent marker paper or marker plus pencil paper. I keep searching, but I haven't found the perfect sketchbook yet. And no, an okay sketchbook is not the same as an excellent sketchbook. Anyway, I do have a lot of mixed media books, and they're fun for random sketches or daily practice routines, and the price is almost always reasonable. I do have a few issues with being left handed, and that's why you're always going to see me working sideways or backwards through a book. I also spin my paper around too much to be really comfortable using anything bulky or something that doesn't lay completely flat. Wait, I was trying to be positive here though. Okay, sketchbooks today are much better than they were a decade ago. But I just really hate it when something in a journal turns out really, really good, but I can't use it for anything because there's pencil scars on it, or weird burnishing, or the tooth of the paper shows up in the scan. But remember, I'm almost always in production mode, and that's probably not true for you. I just think it's safer for me, and I'm happier when I'm working on loose sheets of Bristol board, marker cardstock, and sometimes I even use watercolor paper. For the cast shadow, I'm going to speed up the footage here. It's a lot of circular strokes and layering, and frankly, I spent more time on the shadow than I did on the green glass. So, how does working on mixed media paper instead of my usual Bristol change how I color? Well, it changes the marker layers a lot. I end up using lighter markers more than darker markers. First, because the inks look darker, but also because lighter colors blend smoother than darker colors. If I'd been coloring this same light bulb on Bristol, I would have stepped darker on both the G and the YG markers. I also have to think about streak prevention on mixed media paper. On better paper, I barely think about it. With this project, though, I was constantly thinking about not leaving streaks. And you just won't see me coloring a background on mixed media paper. Why invite extra streaks? I also find myself using more markers to make the blends on mixed media paper. I used 4 markers on the green glass, and that probably would have only been 3 markers on Bristol. As far as the pencils go, I find myself hanging off the end of the pencil a lot more on mixed media paper. We hold the pencil further away from the point to reduce pressure, And I get into trouble with pressure more on mixed media paper where it matters and it shows up. I also don't think my colors look as dynamic on mixed media. The pink reflections, they would have popped more on Bristol, and I'm honestly disappointed with them here. I'm also not a fan of straight colored pencil on mixed media paper. This shadow here, I'm fighting with it, and I almost never fight with my shadows. It's not the worst, but the same techniques would have been easier and they would have looked better on better paper. Now, I've got to say, this video, it's not a review of a specific paper, and that's why I haven't mentioned which brand I'm working on. You know me, I don't do sponsored videos, and I turn down offers for free products. Maybe that'll change in the future, but for right now, I like being a free agent, and I don't have to please any company. But to be clear, nothing that I've said here today is specific to this sketchbook. I'm just talking about mixed media sketchbooks in general. And frankly, of all the sketchbooks I've tried, this one is my favorite. It's just that I'm not a sketchbook kind of girl. If you want more product information about what I've used here today, there's a resource page linked down in the description. And for a detailed look at my preferred marker pencil paper, check out this video here.